specialization is for insects, right? As a human being, you have the gift of being able to really do whatever you want and to live a rich, fulfilling life. You want to be able to expand your wings and really see what's out there and, experience life for what it is.
This week, we are brought to you by Attest. Attest is a consumer research platform that enables brands to make customer understanding a competitive advantage with continuous insights. By combining unparalleled speed and data quality with on-demand research guidance, the platform makes it simple and fast to uncover opportunities with consumer data and grow without guesswork. Hello and welcome to the Shiny New Object podcast. My name is Tom Ollerton. I'm the founder of Automated Creative, and this is a weekly podcast where I get to speak to cool, smart marketing people from around the industry, from around the world, about their vision, what they think is going to happen next, and where we think the industry is going. I'm on a call with Narsingh Dixit, who is Digital Growth Marketing Manager at Unilever. So, Narsingh, for anyone who doesn't know who you are and what you do, can you give them a bit of a background?
First of all, thanks again for having me on this podcast. I'm a big fan of it myself, and I think you've done a wonderful job of curating a really cool, selection of guests. So hopefully I can leave something meaningful behind for your audience today. In terms of what I'm currently doing, so digital growth at Unilever. I've also recently started teaching at BrainStation, where I teach digital marketing to young professionals or also experienced professionals that are looking to learn a little bit more about the space. And I think I've been really lucky in my career so far to kind of have the opportunity to work across multiple industries spanning big tech, healthcare, real estate, along with a stint in the agency world. And while my roles have primarily been within marketing, I've kind of gone out of my way to learn a bit more about sales, IT, product, and operations as well. So a lot of different verticals and a lot of different org sizes really allowed me to get a more holistic sense of running a business, understanding different need states and problems and thriving regardless of the situation.
So you mentioned some odd thing. I think real estate, you mentioned that.
Yes.
Definitely our first guest who's mentioned real estate in 200 episodes. So that it's kind of interesting to know more about that. But sales, IT, products and ops and agency experience as well. I mean, that's pretty broad. So I'm kind of curious to know what new belief or behavior have you taken on in the last 5 years that's really helped you with your work life?
Yeah. I think, that's a good question. For me, what I realized through this process was this idea of forcing myself to be in an uncomfortable position. And the more I kind of learned about it, having a little bit of a psychology background through my university time, I did a little bit of research and discovered the idea of growth mindset, which has become popularized over the last 5 to 7 years now. And I guess maybe I want to backtrack a little bit and talk about what a growth mindset isn't. And there's a misconception that, people are born with it and, it's just something they've always had. And that's really not the case. Everyone has the capability to work with a growth or a fixed mindset. And the second thing is, the growth mindset is usually thought about as rewarding and praising effort. I think there's also sort of a territory you can enter there where it starts to become limiting in and of itself, where you start to believe, for example, if you tend to reward people for being intelligent, they might seem to think that they're intelligent, and that by itself becomes a fixed mindset. So I think, to me, kind of experiencing different areas, different business types was all kind of related to my goal of seeing if I can put myself in positions and still be able to thrive and yield results. And so real estate, as you pointed out, was a little bit of a left field industry to get into. But I think the beauty of it was because the real estate industry is relatively traditional, it allowed me to introduce, digital marketing concepts and really mature, at least the company that I was a part of, really mature the digital function, from something that was really paid media oriented, to becoming a full-fledged overall holistic strategy.
So the growth mindset is popular, but what I found myself thinking when we were chatting just then is I would never say that to someone socially. Like if I met someone at a party or in the pub or something, yeah, I'm a kind of growth mindset kind of person. If someone said that to me, I'd be like, I've heard those words and I kind of understand what it is. But what's the kind of plain English, like no BS version of that mindset?
Yeah, I would say it's maybe to kind of shape this another way. There's a quote by Darwin that goes something along the lines of, it's not the most intelligent or strongest that survive, but it's those that are most adaptable to change. And it's kind of interesting because by default, human beings don't like change. We kind of like to be in a habitual, routine sort of an environment. But to me, I think I thrive off of learning, off of being in discomfort, and that's been part of the reason why I've kind of been in different industries, is because that challenge eventually starts to wane off, depending on the projects that you're working on. And in simple English, I think what I would say the growth mindset is all about is just embracing change.
That's a really nice way of putting it. So my next sort of provocation on growth mindset is that I love that idea of challenging, constantly being uncomfortable, not looking for the path of least resistance, moving into new roles, new verticals, but whatever it was, and all these things you've done, which is really impressive. But at some point, the description of an expert, which I really love, which is something along the lines of an expert is someone who's made all the possible mistakes there are to make in any given field. Mm-hmm. It's not really a growth mindset. It's just repetition. It's repetition with slight changes. It's repetition with like an ever so slightly different angle on, and you just do it so many times that by the end of it, you're just really good at it.
Right.
And so, but that's kind of the opposite of the growth mindset. The growth mindset is, well, change jobs, move country, like, get a new partner, like learn a new thing.
Right.
And so do you start off with the growth mindset, and then when you find your love, do you go deeper into it? Help me understand the tension between having a growth mindset and being open to change, and actually the fact that if you want to be amazing at something, you just got to repeat it over and over again.
Yeah, it's a really, really good question, because it is about finding that balance between that frictional process. And so to kind of paint the picture a little bit, although I've had experiences in a lot of different verticals, my foundation has primarily been within the marketing world. So what that's allowed me to do is, whether it's B2B, whether it's B2C, I've been improving the ability to be able to market and, just be a good marketer, fundamentally. And, as B2B, B2C are different types of marketing. Obviously, the fundamentals are the same, but the tactics that you use, the strategy that you use, the way you think, the questions you ask are very different. So it kind of forces you to start to understand and ask better questions along the way. And, there's this interesting thought around specialization that I stumbled upon. I think it was earlier this year, that, specialization is for insects, right? As a human being, you have the gift of being able to really do whatever you want, and to live a rich, fulfilling life. You want to be able to expand your wings and really see what's out there, and, experience life for what it is. So while specialization is great, I think it's about, realizing that, you don't have to specialize in one industry, in one domain. You can start to build on top of that, right? So being a generalist is actually very powerful. So if you look at, let's say, CEOs today, they usually tend to have, a background in multiple different domains before they kind of take that generalist role to be able to run an entire organization, right? You're not going to find, just a hyper-focused specialist to be able to, run a company, that has to solve a lot of different problems. So that's sort of how I find the balance between the two, where you can still specialize within the broad sense of, marketing, but you can still do it, across multiple different areas.
That's a very good answer to the question. So we're going to move on now. I want to know what your top marketing tip is. So marketing being your core and all of this experience around it being your growth mindset. But what is a tip that you share most often with the people you work with?
Yeah, I think my favorite tip, and this is something that I learned a long time ago, was people don't know what they want. And it's something that, I obviously say with caution, especially as a data marketer, because definitely please listen to your customers. But I think this is where the art and science of marketing really, really shines. And I wanted to paint this picture by talking about spaghetti sauce. And this is something that, I had read or heard a long time ago, but it stuck with me. And it was the reinvention of spaghetti sauce. There's a researcher, I think his official title is like a psychophysicist, who goes by the name, his name is Howard Moskowitz. And he had done some research, I think it was for Pepsi, where when they were releasing Diet Pepsi, they'd come to him with the problem that, we figured out that, we have aspartame, the range is between 8 to 12%, but we don't really know what the sweet spot is. So can you, go out there and figure out what is the sweet spot that's going to sell with consumers? And when he did the research, most researchers would expect some sort of a normal distribution curve where, most people kind of, congregated towards one sort of a data point. But what bothered him and what was unusual was that the data was all over the place. And, this kind of plagued him for a couple of years, and he was trying to figure out what went wrong. And what he realized was, they were asking the wrong question. It was not what is the perfect Diet Pepsi? It's, what are the perfect Diet Pepsis? And to kind of illustrate that picture, he finally, got a breakthrough opportunity with Campbell to really prove that hypothesis. And this was when Campbell was struggling with their Prego brand spaghetti sauce, which was, I think, objectively better. Even in those blind tests that they used to do back in the day, it was better than Ragu, but it was just not doing really well in the marketplace. And so what Howard ended up doing was, I think he tested like 45 different versions of spaghetti sauce, and thousands of customers came in and tasted it. And when he looked at the data, he was able to find 3 large clusters. The first cluster was people who like plain spaghetti sauce. The second cluster was people that like spicy spaghetti sauce. But the third cluster, which was really the breakthrough, was extra chunky. And this was unheard of. Right. All the research that had been done on spaghetti sauce, extra chunky was not really an option that was even relevant. But lo and behold, Prego went to market with extra chunky. They made, I think, $600 million in the next 10 years off of that product line. And it the key takeaway from that was, it's not, if you asked a consumer what they wanted, they wouldn't really tell you that they wanted extra chunky. So it's kind of, you as a marketer need to do your due diligence to look at the data, understand the data, and also be able to derive the insights of relevance, and then provide a solution that you believe is going to address that particular problem. And as a bonus takeaway for your listeners, this was also the introduction of the concept of horizontal segmentation within product categories. So this is why we today have, multiple different olive oils and multiple different vinegar options and multiple different, ketchup variations, et cetera. This is all kind of stemmed from this one little, research project that changed the way researchers talk.
You make it sound all so simple, doesn't like? But another time we'll get into the weeds of why that doesn't happen. This episode of the Shiny New Object podcast is brought to you in partnership with MadFest. Whether it's live in London or streamed online to the global marketing community, you can always expect a distinctive and daring blend of fast-paced content, startup innovation pitches, and unconventional entertainment from MadFest events. You'll find me causing trouble on stage, recording live versions of this podcast, and sharing a beer with the nicest and most influential people in marketing. Check it out at www.madfestlondon.com. We are going to talk about your shiny new object, which is personalisation. So some might argue that that's very shiny and new for some brands, but entirely old school for some others. So why is personalisation your shiny new object, and why do you think it represents the future of this industry?
Yeah, I think what's really interesting about personalisation is I think a few years ago, I think McKinsey had come out with an article about why digital personalization at scale is the holy grail of marketing, which I still do believe it is truly the holy grail. And it's interesting to see the evolution, right? Because it's not that personalization is a new concept, but, marketers got pretty sloppy over time. And, a direct consequence of that was consumers started to feel uncomfortable, and, it resulted, and rightfully so, in the introduction of privacy laws. And, we've got GDPR. In Canada, we have CASL, which are, two of the most strictest laws that exist in terms of data acquisition, governance, et cetera. And I think, although we've done a good job to get to the point where we can personalize, communications better, advertising better, we're still far away from unlocking that true, one-to-one personalization that would drive impact at scale, right? I think the scale part is pretty important there. And just a personal example, the pair of headphones that I'm wearing right now, I shopped for these 2 months ago. I'm still getting ads about headphones. It's like, I'm long gone. I'm not buying another pair of headphones, anytime soon. So, things are still not there. In terms of being able to, manage that experience better. And if you think about personalization, I mean, the benefits are massive, right? You can reduce your acquisition cost by 50%, uplift your revenue, increase the efficiency of marketing spend, by up to 30%. So, I guess for me, the way I think about it is that there are 3 building blocks to, driving personalization better. And really get to that last frontier of personalization. And it all kind of starts with first-party data. And I know this is not easily accessible, especially, if you're a smaller business, to be able to control the data to that extent. But, it truly is something that unlocks the end-to-end personalization that you would need. To give you a couple of examples, 35% of Amazon sales come from their recommended products section, right? Like similar products. Recommended products, et cetera. And let's think of Starbucks for a second. Their rewards and loyalty program drives 50% of their revenue. That's massive, right? But the key insight here is that they have access to the data. They own that data. And so therefore they can enrich, learn, and, be able to control the narrative very, very cleanly. And that kind of leads me to the second building block, which is also kind of interesting, is I think we're starting to see the dissipation of the linear consumer journey. Obviously this has been brewing up for the last few years, but context is more relevant than a linear consumer journey. So it's almost as if, as a marketer, you need to start building and constructing a lot of roads, and all of these roads lead to Rome, and having the ability to listen to customer signals and respond to them immediately, right? So that agility is super important, but it all revolves around context. So it's not really having the perfect customer journey, but it's being ready to respond to what your customer needs when they need it, which leads me to the last building block, which is top-down segmentation. And going back to the spaghetti sauce story, it's kind of starting broad, building it to clusters, and then finally, and this is, I guess, what automated creative does really well as well, is leveraging AI and machine learning to drive the personalization, right? Human beings are just not possible to be able to, personalize content to a million different people. So it's really trying to understand how you can leverage the much better AI that we have today, and ideally do it, in a proprietary fashion that's strictly for your company. So whether that's Unilever or any other company for that matter, if you can leverage AI for your company based on the data that you have and you own, maybe you'll be able to truly unlock that, epitome of personalization.
So I'm going to say something you said earlier and play it back to you. So personalization works when you show someone an ad, be that through, Starbucks, like their loyalty program, or Amazon, people bought who, you should buy this because someone else bought this, or sorry, the other way around. But you also said earlier that people don't know what they want. Mm-hmm. So there's a bit of I think there's a tension in what you're saying here, that brands should personalize and give people what they want. But you also said that earlier, people don't know what they want. So how can a brand possibly guess? How can a brand make a decision tree? How can a brand create a structure, AI driven or other, that promotes certain things when people don't know what they want anyway?
Right. Yeah, that's a good question. And I'll kind of answer this using the Amazon example, right? I'm trying to think of something that's probably relevant to. Okay, so for example, let's say you're doing a home office setup, right? And you've got everything kind of set up, and someone comes to me and they're like, yeah, what else do you think would improve your home office experience? I don't know. People don't know what they want. I'm not sure. Amazon has access to data that all the people that have been setting up their home offices, for some reason, have recently been investing in a ring light, right, to improve their office experience, and that's the data point that they have, which they can start to test, with multiple consumers based on the relationship that they have there. Where okay, so let's try and promote the ring light, and if they do see that trend, that's sort of that personalization kind of marrying up to not knowing what you wanted by uncovering something that might be of interest, looking at the data, at an individual and cluster level, right? So hopefully that kind of answers that, the tension between me not knowing what I wanted, but, because Amazon had access to millions and millions of data points, they were able to recommend something of relevance.
And I find myself thinking about this a lot. It's kind of slightly embarrassing, but there's also a ton of data that Amazon doesn't have. Like, there's loads of things in life there isn't any data for, right? But yeah, we obsess about the things that there are. Like, so say, for example, someone wants to improve their home office. The thing that might have the best impact on the home office might be half an hour's more sleep. For example, I'm just being completely tangential, but Amazon has no idea. I don't know, maybe Alexa kind of pumps back snore sounds or something. I don't know, but they're certainly not not as far as we know, leveraging that data. So, it also had this thing I talk about a lot is that, Facebook has, brands have data on which ads work, but they don't have any data on what ads they were seen alongside. So people assume that the creative is the thing that drove the outcome that they were interested in, whereas actually it's the context within the fact that creative was seen. So an example would be if you just watch a Netflix documentary about veganism, you're going to feel differently about a McDonald's advert to if you've been in a bar and had 6 beers and no lunch. Do you know what I mean? Like, it's there isn't any data for the thing that you can't see. And so that's the thing with personalization for me, that like, I almost don't think it's personalization. It's recommendation, right? Based on a huge data set that is still limited, we can recommend that you should try these things. But like, I don't really feel that as personalized. Personalized is someone, me walking into a shop and saying, "Hi Tom, how's it going? Would you like your usual how's your daughter, how's your wife?" So, that kind of thing. So I think that the advertising gives these technologies and these techniques words that like oversell what they actually do.
Absolutely. And to that point, that's why I think it's the perfect definition. I think personalization is the holy grail. Will we ever reach it? I'm not sure.
So who do you think does personalization well? Who do you experience personalization from and you're like, oh, that's amazing?
Yeah, I do want to say, again, just going back to Amazon, I think they do a great job. And when you talked about sleep, it just started to make me think about, when you start to expand like a Google or an Amazon, right? Obviously, this is something only bigger companies can achieve. But when you start to expand your portfolio into multiple verticals, it actually does give you access to some really interesting information, right? So let's say Amazon, from a shopping perspective, might not be able to derive a lot of insights, but they also have Amazon Prime Video or they have Prime Music. And think about what you can do with that, right? Like, imagine you're able to now see, oh, well, Tom actually is not asleep at midnight because he's watching the new show that was released, right? So you can actually start to get into these deeper levels of analysis if you have access to verticals around a single person, but through multiple different offerings that you have. So I don't know. I just kind of went off into a tangent there, but it just made me think about that just the access that you have, with different technologies these days.
So you've obviously put your hand up and said you're talking about big businesses with a lot of data. So what do you do if you're a marketer and you don't work for Amazon, you don't work for Google, you can't leverage this kind of huge amount of insight, and you're a CPG brand who isn't a Unilever? Like, how do you approach personalization when you don't have a ton of first party data?
Yeah, I think in that case, it's kind of important to still focus on research and be able to still make use of the data that you have access to, right? Something as simple and free as Google Analytics can tell you quite a lot about your consumers, what they're appreciating about your app or your website journey, and still be able to kind of personalize at that level where you can, again, start to form data clusters. You can start to see your website path. How do customers convert? Right, and at least optimize at that second block that I touched upon. So, if block one is a lot of data and no organization, block two is clustered organization, which is achievable for anyone. And like I said, block three, which is the ultimate layer, is AI driven anyway. So it's kind of irrelevant what size of business you are, because that's the area that everyone's trying to figure out. So I would say at the very minimum, at least you can get to the clustered level and optimize experiences for those clusters. And just to kind of paint the picture a little bit better here, if you asked a group of people, let's say an audience of 300, 400 people, to come up with the coffee that they would like, to drink, they would probably arrive at something like they themselves would score it at like 60 to out of 100, right? But if you were able to create clusters out of that same group, that satisfaction level actually jumps to like a 70 to 75 out of 100, right? It's a very basic level of segmentation, but you have improved, the coffee quite dramatically. The satisfaction quite dramatically from the consumer's lens. So that's what I would recommend is, even if you can't get to the one-to-one personalization, you can still get to a segmentation level, personalization.
So what does the future hold for personalization? I remember, I missed getting on 10 years ago, but every presentation at a conference would have Tom Cruise in Minority Report. There's that scene where he walks through a mall, shopping center, as we call them here. And there's a poster, I think it's even a Guinness poster, and it says, hey, I can't remember his name, but he says, "Hey, Tom Cruise, you've got you a nice cold Guinness." And just think about the castle or the GDPR level of compliance you'd have to go through to make that ad work. You'd have to like sign into the shopping center and agree that their OS could track your identity, and then you'd have to sign up on the Guinness site. Like that kind of personalization probably won't happen. Certainly not in an advertising context. So, where do you think it's going to go?
I think we're. If you think of an equilibrium, right? It always swings, one way and the other. I mean, this analogy works for anything from politics to what have you. And I think marketers and companies in general had a lot of free reign. We're kind of seeing the pendulum swing the other way now, where it's, more legislation, more law, more restrictions, more autonomy. But the thing is, consumers are actually very receptive to personalization when it's done right. It's just they don't appreciate when it goes wrong. And ultimately, I think there's going to be, more desirability to want that personalized information because really we've spoiled consumers, right? We've given them the instant gratification of having more optimized content, having more optimized creative, having more optimized advertising, being tailored to them. And I wonder, right, this is just more of a speculation here. I wonder if that's going to see that shift back where, they do start to appreciate and start to, want those moments of personalization and tailoring. But I do feel that the future is going to be one-to-one communication. And we're kind of seeing this with the emergence of Web3, with the decentralization of businesses and relationships in general, where, if Adidas has an NFT tomorrow, I have to purchase that NFT directly from Adidas and build that one-to-one relationship with the business. So that one-to-one, again, going back to ownership of data, I think that's going to become a key theme again, where, you're going to own the data, you're going to own the relationship, you're going to have as much information as you can derive from that relationship to be able to provide a better service or solution to that consumer.
Well, unfortunately, we've come to the end of the podcast now. So if someone wanted to talk to you about personalization, your experience and your views, how would you like them to do that?
Yeah, I think, LinkedIn is probably the easiest way to connect with me. Very open, just kind of, brief introduction and, more than happy to connect and chat with people there.
And what makes a great outreach message to you?
Honestly, I would just say, an intro, what you're looking for, and how you feel that information would be beneficial. I do like to be generous with everything that I've learned and all the experiences that I've had. So even if you're looking simply to learn and have a quick coffee chat, I'm also open to share, what I can and hopefully inspire the next, era of marketers.
Narsingh, that is a lovely offer. Thank you so much for your time.
Thanks a lot, Tom.
Hi, just before you go, I'd really appreciate it if you could take the time to write a review of the Shiny New Object podcast on Apple Podcasts or iTunes, whatever it's called these days, or whichever podcast provider you use. We're an indie podcast, so it would go a long way for us if you could just share the word and give us a bit of a support on those channels. That would just be fantastic. If you haven't got time, that's also cool. And yeah, if you could tell your colleagues about the podcast, and also, if possible, don't forget to subscribe. And I'd love to hear your feedback. If you'd like to speak on the podcast or be a guest, or you think I'm asking the wrong questions, anything, I'd be super interested to hear what you think. So please email me at tom@automatedcreative.net. That's TOM at, I'm not going to bother spelling it. Anyway, you'll work it out. Thanks so much.